Hey, buddy. Hey. Hey, you guys want to talk about microtransactions? Yeah? Aloha. You want to talk about microtransactions? I think he wants to talk about microtransactions. All right, so there's been a lot of discussion about Dragon's Dogma 2's microtransactions, which is really hard for me to say for some reason. And so I wanted to make a video about it. I'm going to be sharing my opinion on these particular types of microtransactions in games, although I could just blanket say I'm never going to be particularly in favor of them, even if I tend to just ignore them to enjoy the games that I like. I'm going to be clarifying what the impact they have on the game actually is, because I've seen some misinformation about what some of these items actually do. And finally, and I think the most important thing, I want to talk about what the impact these types of microtransactions have on the overall gaming landscape, because I've also seen some opinions that, at least to me, seem a little bit off the mark. So for those unaware, Dragon's Dogma 2 is the latest single-player action RPG released by Capcom, a sequel to the original game that released in the early 2010s to a sort of mixed response. But it garnered a cult following, and so a lot of people are looking forward to the second game. They paid attention to the reviews, to the many releases that were coming out, and of course, put a lot of trust in Itsuno-san, the game's director, who considers Dragon's Dogma kind of like his baby. He chose to make Devil May Cry 5 before making Dragon's Dogma 2, but it's good to see that the guy still knows exactly what he wants out of this franchise that he really wants to nurture and really loves. However, after the game's release, it was noted that the game actually has a bunch of microtransactions, which you will see on your screen now. Now, this was made aware to the people who had review copies, but it was largely something that was only noticed by the general public after the game's release. Now, foregoing that entire piece of drama aside, I want to talk about these microtransactions kind of in a bubble. How do they actually impact Dragon's Dogma 2 as a game? What is the actual goal of these kinds of microtransactions? If you have played the game, you might be well aware of these things, but if you haven't, you might see these things and think, oh, well, they're clearly just trying to sell me a bunch of extra stuff by nerfing the game and making it a bigger problem. I'd say you could argue that with a single one of these microtransactions, but the rest of them are, oddly enough, strangely inconsequential to the overall progress of the game. Well, let's go over what each of them does. All right, so here's the list of the DLCs available in Dragon's Dogma 2. I'm just going to go down the list and talk about how good any of these items actually are. First, you have the camping gear, which, don't get me wrong, camping is useful in Dragon's Dogma. You can use it to get all your max health back, change the time of day, and most importantly, grill and cook and eat some delicious looking meat. However, the supplies for camping are so readily available in-game, and you'll realistically only lose your camping kits when you're attacked in the evening. They do weigh a decent amount, and this says that it doesn't weigh that much, but all in all, I would never spend $3 for something so readily available in-game, so that one is just pretty much useless. Then you have the second one with the Dragon's Dogma music and sound collection. This is kind of sort of okay in my book. I'd rather, if you want to do this, it just be in the game, obviously. But I'm also someone who firmly believes I'm playing a brand new game that somebody worked on to make, new UI sound effects and music and everything. Why would I want to kind of overwrite that and just play with the thing that I already experienced and know instead of experiencing something brand new? That's different from the fact that it costs $3, but again, I don't really care. It's not like I would buy it anyway, so that's that. Then you've got the Harpy Snare Smoke Beacons. I've gotten a ton of these in game. I've never used one before. They just round up harpies so they're a little bit less annoying. So if you really want to spend $1 to group harpies up when you're going to run into thousands of harpies throughout the game, I guess you could get that. But again, useless in my opinion. Now, the Heartfelt Pendant is actually useful. You can give it as a gift to an NPC and that will raise your affinity and improve your relationship with them. But there are plenty of items that you can already get in-game that are similar, if not even better, than this item due to their availability. So wouldn't spend the money on that either. Then you have Ambivalent Rift Incense, which allows you to change the way your pawn addresses you. I need to talk about this one a little bit later, but it's strange to me that this is here for, again, a reason that I'll talk about a bit later. Wouldn't buy that one either. It's totally not worth it. Available in-game for barely any currency at all. So there you go. Makeshift Jail Key. If you break the law and get sent to jail, you might need that. However, they again are available in-game for barely any gold. You'll get some from certain quests, and there are other methods of getting out of the jail, so that would be for the lazy. The Art of Metamorphosis. Now, this one I have seen a lot of misinformation about. And I think it's because people heard what it did, but didn't read what it did. The Art of Metamorphosis allows you to change your character's appearance. That's it. There are some basic things you can do to your character's appearance in-game without using the Art of Metamorphosis, but it's a character editor. I remember a bunch of people kept saying, oh, they charge you money to make another character. That's not what it does. Unfortunately, the answer to how you make another character isn't exactly much better. You need to make another profile on Steam, PlayStation, or Xbox because you can only have one save file at the moment per profile. They're fixing that. So I'm not going to hold that. But this isn't a new character. This just lets you change the appearance. Also readily available in game. And in fact, in most cases is even cheaper than the Rift Incense, which just lets you change the way your pawn talks to you and like generally acts. So, I'll get into the actual cost of those things in a little bit. Now I'm going to skip this one because the port crystal one I have to come back to. It's by far the most important one on the list. Then the next 5 of these are wakestone packs. Wakestones essentially allow you to resurrect any NPC as long as they're somewhat important from the dead. That includes yourself if you were to fall over and die, your pawns if they were to fall over or die, or any NPC, whether they be part of the main story side quest or just be NPCs that are trying to live their life inside of the city. So there's a number of ways that these can be used strategically, creatively, or to fix a mistake that you may have made at some point. But they are, again, very readily available in the game, and you really don't have that much of a use for them unless you find yourself dying a lot, and instead of loading a save, using these to just get back up and continue the fight. I think I've got like 13 of them right now, and the number of mistakes you'd have to get to even fix this is ridiculous. Not to mention that if you make a town-wide mistake, there is an item available in-game that you can use to fix that as well, though that takes quite some time to actually get to, so it's not like I can just say that one's available willy-nilly. And then finally, we come to the Rift Crystals. Now, Rift Crystals are obtained through a number of ways. You can get them from finding new Rift Stones throughout the world. You can get them from certain enemies as drops, but most importantly, you get them when you send your pawn out into the online space. Players can use each other's pawns online, and they can give them gifts and whatnot. But when your pawn returns from helping other people in their worlds, it will bring back a not insignificant chunk of RC. Now, I have about 12,000 RC in my save file right now, and I've really only used it in order to actually hire higher level pawns, so I don't have to hire pawns as frequently. If you hire a pawn near your level, it costs 0 RC. It's only if you want to just completely break the game that you even need the extra RC in the first place. So selling RC doesn't even make any sense to me as a whole, especially because, again, there are enemies that you can farm as well that drop RC, even though in small quantities, enough to get anything you really want done within a reasonable time frame. So that's just a whole lot of nothing for this section. But what the most interesting thing is, remember how I mentioned Art of Metamorphosis and the Rift Incense were affordable? They cost RC. And most of the Rift Essences cost 2,000, with one of them only costing 500. And the Art of Metamorphosis, that character editor, is only 500 RC. So there's like a major redundancy in these microtransactions to even have those things here on top of having the RC down there. It's just a strange thing to me because almost all of these are so easy to obtain. But I'm not done going over the list. I have to go back to the one most important item on this list, the one that really does spark the biggest controversy. The port crystal is, as it calls it, a warp location marker. Now, fast travel in Dragon's Dogma is severely limited. It was in the original game's release until they eventually added the Eternal Fairy Stone, and now in Dragon's Dogma 2, it's back to being something you don't really get to do a lot of. In fact, I've only found 2 port crystals that are static. They're always there. You don't need to actually collect any items to use them. You just have to visit the locations and actually touch the port crystal. And honestly, those 2 are really close together. But the port crystal item that's being sold here is an item that you can place anywhere on the open map. And then by using a fairy stone, an item that allows you to fast travel, go to any of the port crystals that are either in the towns specifically placed or that you've placed down on the ground. The fact that that is available here is a pretty big deal. While there are port stones that you can get to very quickly in the game, it is unlikely that as a brand new player without guides that you will find them within the first several hours of playing. That means that while there are things like the ox carts to fast travel between locations within the game, you will probably be really hurting for port crystals. So the fact that they sell one here, this is the only item where I look at it and go, yeah, you probably went too far on that one. Now, I'm going to do you all a solid favor in this video, but I'm going to add a skip in the description. I'm going to tell you how to get 4 port stones in the very first area of the game. That way you would never even need something like this. Now, keep in mind, I have to spoil some things to tell you that. I'm only going to spoil one really important thing, but some of you may not want to engage in that. So there's going to be a skip to post-port crystal discussion in the description. Skip to that if you don't want to hear this part, but otherwise, here's 4 very easy port crystals you can get somewhat early into the game. So to the north, a little bit northwest of Harv Village, you have an area called the Mirage Forest. And in this forest is a griffin's nest. In that griffin's nest, there is a port crystal just lying in the nest. Now, there is a griffin guarding it, but if you wanted to, you could grab the port crystal and get the heck out of there. There's 2 ways to get to this griffin. You can actually jump down from the cliffs into the actual nest. The problem being that I found that my pawns decided they didn't want to go that way, and they subsequently ran all the way around through the Mirage Forest, so I was soloing the griffin for a little bit. So that can be dangerous. The Mirage Forest itself is full of a massive amount of undead. It can be very dangerous to traverse, but that being said, it's a small price to pay for being able to teleport wherever you want with this one particular item. And remember, these items are not permanently placed. You can pick it up and put it down someplace else when you're done with the location that it's in. So that's one. Number 2 is probably the first one I should have mentioned. When you actually get to a, quote, point of no return as part of the first major chapter of the game, you'll get a warning from the NPC that progresses through the story. You'll be given a port crystal as part of the main story itself. So if you have been rushing the main story, or even if you haven't been, that's going to be another quick way to get a second one. Now, the other 2 both come from the same location. You can find a mountain shrine in this location on the map after going through a ton of different parts. There's like a dungeon and then a cave and a side quest to go with it. So you'll have to go through all of that. And when you get to the top at the mountain shrine, there will be the Sphinx, who will give you 5 riddles to solve. Now, one of the riddles asks you for your most treasured item. It doesn't matter what item you give, but whatever item you do decide to hand over will be duplicated. So you'll just get an extra of it. Anyone with common sense would know to get a port crystal. It is one of the most valuable items in the entire game. So of course you go with the port crystal. There are other options, but you're probably going to go with the port crystal. And one of her other puzzles also gives you a port crystal. So as long as you do all of the Sphinx puzzles and make sure to give that prized possession over and do them all correctly, then you'll get 2 extra port crystals out of that. There's also a port crystal that's available, a 5th one, and when you go into the second zone, there's going to be a shrine which will take worm life crystals as a currency, and for 20 worm life crystals, you can buy a single port crystal. So those are the 5 that I found in my playthrough thus far, and I'm sure there are tons that I have missed, like at least 2 or 3 more. To me, that's tons that I've missed, but those are some easy ones. So I probably just saved you at $3 if you were planning on buying that, but that's what I mean. That's why this one's kind of like the step too far in terms of integrated into gameplay. But to me, the weirder thing is, almost all of these microtransactions are nigh useless to actually purchase. Now, that has 2 different caveats. That means, great, Dragon's Dogma 2 isn't trying to push these purchases on you for the most part. It wants to offer them as options to players who strictly want a somewhat easier time. They go through, they grab a few of these things. It's something they don't have to think about. Fantastic. And those of us who have no interest in it, we can just move on and not think about it. But on the other hand, if they're so useless, why include them at all? Because anyone that's looking at a list of microtransactions for a full price game who hasn't played it yet will see those items and think the game is trying to make you get these items. They don't need to be told that. That is a first impression, and that is very, very important when you're trying to, at the core, sell the box price game. That is the only thing they really want to achieve, and these are just extras. But that impression hurts the ability to do that, and is a practice that, if a game was less hyped and less popular, would doom it into oblivion. I mean, I saw Like a Dragon get a ton of flack for the New Game Plus thing, but it also has a store that doesn't, look too differently from this one, with items priced way, way higher than the Dragon's Dogma 2 items. And that's just becoming an industry standard that people don't really like. And it's kind of a difficult place to be in. My opinion is that these things shouldn't be done. But unfortunately, I also play the hypocrite. They will never stop me from purchasing a game I am actually excited for. They are, however, for me, the swaying factor in a game that I'm only kind of interested in, and I'm not really sure if I'm going to purchase it yet. But the point is that if you buy a game that has this type of microtransaction, you're automatically telling the developer or the publisher that it's okay for them to do it. Now, some people think, well, if I don't want to support the microtransactions, I won't buy them. You talk with your wallet. And in a lot of cases, that makes sense. It makes sense for games where their entire income is based on their microtransactions. But again, Dragon's Dogma 2 wants to sell you the box and then offer these as additional items, which means that if you're not dissuaded by these things and you purchase the box, you're telling them, well, I'm not going to use those, but I'm okay with you doing it, which means that those first impressions are going to keep happening, which means the people who get lulled into a sense of thinking they're useful and buy them are going to keep doing it. And the people who don't care and just say, whatever, I got mad dosh, let me just buy all this stuff, are going to do it anyway. And all of those things keep developers doing and publishers doing those types of things, doing this type of thing. So it's a really unfortunate scenario. I say unfortunate, it's just not a good one. There's nothing unfortunate about it. It's just not a good scenario to be in. That it's such an important game, and it's not like it's anything new to Capcom either. I remember Devil May Cry 5, one of my favorite franchises of all time. I saw they were selling red orbs. Now, red orbs are the primary currency of Devil May Cry 5. They're used to buy all of your upgrades. They're used to buy like little items that you can help yourself with on some difficulties. And on top of that, there's actually a weapon in that game that rapidly, and I mean rapidly, consumes red orbs. So I, every time wanted to use that weapon to try and get my platinum, I had to farm red orbs. But there was always that lingering, oh, there's red orbs for sale kind of thought in my head. There's always that, like, it's really not useful to buy, but there's always that, like, one scenario you can think of where you just, in the back of your head, you're like, ooh, I got a few dollars to spare, right? Do I really want to farm this mission to have enough for just so I can make that one attempt at that other mission to try and get the S rank for my achievement? It's always there. And that's just the same thing here. The whole time I was looking for a port crystal, all I could think to myself was, what's $3, right? And that's not a good thing. That shouldn't be the first thought that I have. And, at least it doesn't advertise these things in game, but you know about them now. We know about them. We see them on the Steam page. You see them on the PlayStation Store, on the Xbox Store. They're there. They exist. And so it's just such a weird decision to make that feels like it's the pros are so little. It's essentially just looking for money that's on the ground. When I was a kid, I used to walk around looking at the ground. Every grocery store, every arcade, every Blockbuster I went into, I just looked at the ground because I would just want to find money that people dropped and take it. This is essentially the same thing. They're just looking at the ground and looking to find where's like any money that I can pick up. Because like if the money's not there, someone else is going to get the money. Someone else is going to notice that $5 bill on the ground. They're not going to be the good Samaritan and give it back. I want that $5 bill. Capcom wants that $5 bill for the 2,500 Rift Crystals at the bottom. So that's all it seems like to me. And I don't know. I feel like at some point, your goodwill with the community, your goodwill with the people who have supported your games, who have been lifting you up. Everyone's been like, Cap God, Cap God, Cap God. But every time something like this happens, it slips a little bit. And at some point, you have to wonder when it slips enough for another kind of Cap recession, no longer Cap God. And I want to see less of this. I don't want to see that happen. Capcom's had such a good run in recent years. I'd like to keep it that way. Okay. So overall, don't buy these things. Don't buy any of them. You have no reason to buy them. Most of them are useless. But if you want to buy the game and play the game, just know you are ultimately supporting that this is okay because it's not dissuading you from buying the game. So we make those kind of decisions every day. I don't really care. That's just kind of the plain, simple, whatever it is about it. That's just how it is, and you have to accept it. But that's what it is, and that's what I wanted to talk about. So anyway, thanks for watching this video. Sorry I got a little ranty at the end, but it is a pretty serious topic. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care.